Hi, and welcome to Coping During the COVID Crisis. I'm Janet Gross. Most people are already preparing for a post-pandemic future, thinking about how to get back to normal-ish. And certainly parents are focusing on more than just their own future. Their children's lives are about to change again. Dr. Roy Salgado, professor of counseling at the University of Holy Cross, is here to talk about some of those issues and some strategies that might help parents navigate this upcoming journey for themselves and their kids.
Right.
Because it's a journey.
It is a journey. You know, last year we were thrown into the situation in which we just all had to respond immediately, and we just had to get on board.
Yep.
Now we are here a year later in easing into a maybe post-COVID type of situation where restrictions have been eased, and so we are encountering more engagements with other people. But parenting has been impacted during this year, and perhaps parenting is going to continue to look different beyond COVID, and different in ways that we just weren't used to prior to COVID, nor had to think about. The main pieces of that are education and technology, independent of one another, and then education and technology together.
Right.
You know, we think of when kids were sick. I don't know if you remember before COVID, but when a kid got sick before COVID, you called and said, I need to keep them home. They're sick, they have a fever or whatever, and they're not going to attend class. And then they were absent. Now with technology and knowing that how well it can work, you know, certain communities benefited from it really well, others had more of a struggle. But when it does work, it can work well and it can be quite effective. There's some parents that might say, you know what, my child is not well enough to go to school because he's contagious, and we don't want to get other people sick, not only for COVID, but, you know, for the common cold or a flu or some other communicable disease.
Yeah,
right. But they're well enough that they can still attend class remotely. And so parents are starting to do that. I know that as we've eased back into schools reopening and students going back to in-person learning, there have been parents who have opted to go back to in-person learning. But in that process, their child has gotten sick, not necessarily from COVID, but from something else, because people still are getting sick from other types of conditions. And they said, you know what, my child is sick, I'm not going to send him to school today. However, I would like for him to opt into attending class virtually. That has happened. That has happened in our area schools as of late. And because schools are still offering remote learning for those who have not opted to go back for the obvious reasons, they have made those allowances for those specific cases to, even though they've gone to face-to-face, to revert back to, in an instance, for a couple of days, to go to remote. I'm wondering if parents and students are going to have the expectation that this opportunity, that these alternatives are maintained as an option past COVID.
So many things we've learned along the way that have been advantageous, perhaps not even in a COVID world.
Right.
You know, that might benefit. What if you, you know, there are certain things that make you not want to be around people, but you could go to class if you were virtual.
You know? And this is an opportunity. You know, I always like to reframe things in the positive, and I think it's beneficial as a counselor. I think it's beneficial for us to reframe things into a more positive framework. And so, in this whole very difficult and challenging year that the world has experienced, there are some takeaways. There are some things that perhaps we can see as opportunities for the future, and this is perhaps one of them. You know, that missed days, missed class seat time is not necessarily something that has to happen in the way that it had before. We can perhaps not be physically in a face-to-face learning situation at times, but when necessary, when appropriate, when possible, have students have an opportunity to have remote learning, and they don't miss as much school. They're not physically there, but they're still getting the information that they need. And
you got to figure that schools are thinking these things through, too. Because before, we all had to jump in. We were all just, you know, we got to do this now.
Right.
Now there's some time to think it through and say, okay, as we come out of this, what will be permanent changes?
What are the possibilities?
What will school look like? I mean, this could change a lot of things. You know, that maybe we haven't even thought of, but you know there are educators out there working on it going, this could be great.
And parents, too. Parents, I think they have an expectation now. They have an expectation. I want my child to get all of the opportunities afforded to my child. I want them to go to school and learn and get that learning that they need. It's essential. And when they're sick, well, it's not in his classmates' best interest that he be there because he's contagious. He has something that is contagious. I don't know, everything from head lice to COVID.
Oh.
But you know what? He can still learn. He can still be at home and learn, but let's not impact everyone else's health. And let's still have him continue, or her, with his or her education. And I think that parents are having that. We live in a consumer society now where people just, they think of things in terms of a product. Education is another product that people are thinking of things in this way. They're conceptualize things this way. This is no different. And so I'm hearing from parents that they are wanting certain things, certain options, certain possibilities to continue beyond COVID. And I think these conversations with educators in schools is being had.
Sure, and because there are also, some precautions that have to go along with all of these things. Just as we found last year, certain things, you got to be careful of, conversations that happen behind the teacher's back on a web, all those things that, let's fix that,
Yeah.
And so, you want to make sure that, nobody's skipping school by saying, I'm going to be virtual today.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, because the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Yeah. So even though things might change with regard to this, but kids are still kids, and they're going to find ways around.
They're so smart.
They're so smart, and so figuring out how to, I have a test today. Let me take that test remotely. So we need to think ahead, be 2 steps ahead of the kids so that we can offer them what they need, but with the appropriate measures in place.
Right. And so as parents prepare their kids for next year, school will look different, how do we encourage them, and what are ways that parents can help this be yet another transition in their life, to make it easier for them, to not, put too high of an expectation, or whatever?
Well, it's probably important for parents to not have too high of an expectation for themselves as well. To give themselves a break. That this past year has been a new year for everybody, a new experience. The upcoming year is going to be a new year and a new experience for everybody. And what life looks like after a COVID year, with the easing of restrictions, is going to be new to everyone. And so the parent doesn't know the answer, but they're going to try to learn how to obtain answers and then transmit that to their kids in a way that makes sense for their age, and to deliver it in an age-appropriate manner. And so parents just giving themselves that grace and that break and taking a breath and giving to kids what they need in the moment that it is needed.
Okay. We're going to take a break in a minute, but first I wanted to, again, for anybody who might need help walking this through, the University of Holy Cross is still offering this special service. Yes,
even though restrictions have been eased, we are still offering this service for the foreseeable future, where you can receive counseling services free of charge. You just call the number on the screen, and the administrative assistant will take that call and triage it to the clinical director, who will then assign a counselor in training to you and offer you the counseling services that you are seeking.
Okay, and it's virtual, so you make an appointment on whatever platform you're going to do, and it's an amazing thing that you can just reach out for help and get it now.
Anyone in the state of Louisiana.
Okay. All right. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk more of the expected and maybe unexpected situation parents and students might see in this journey beyond the pandemic. Stay with us. Good.
Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Yeah, I get it.
Welcome back. There have been a lot of hurdles to jump this past year, especially for parents. Their roles as providers, caretakers, teachers, comfort givers really expanded during the restrictions of the pandemic. Well, we're joined now by Dr. Rhea Cooper, a University of Holy Cross graduate, to talk about this with us. Thank you for joining us. I know there have been so many unexpected effects on parenting, some not all bad and some not all short term. I guess we're all learning through this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
So what can parents do to prepare their kids for this upcoming school year?
Sure, that's a great question, and thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with you guys and just sharing more information about this topic because it's so needed. So as a whole, parents, what is helpful, and I do a lot of work with play therapy in children. That's my specialty, is working with parents and prepping them. And essentially the most powerful thing that they can do for their children is to validate, to listen, to be prepared, and to give them structure. So what happens, especially through the pandemic, our little ones, as I'll call it, have been so drastically affected by being quarantined, and their whole life was completely uprooted and changed in a matter of, just a few months. So what we saw as a counselor is an increase in anxiety and depression and concern and worry. And these little ones had to completely adjust and to navigate those big crises, as well as the parents. So what the parents can do is just to be completely present with them and to praise them and to point out and encourage them for just making it through this year. And I believe that when they can encourage their children, that will set them up for success going into this next school year, because they'll start the school year with confidence and security versus coming down from all this stress and not feeling like they're being heard or listened to. So I believe it's very impactful for our parents to create structure now so that when they go back to school, their anxiety is settled for the parents as well as the children.
So if I guess the like a platitude of it's going to be great, you're going to love it, you're going to make so many friends, all that may not be as helpful as setting them up for reality and just like you said, the structure so they can be themselves in that.
Exactly. Yes, ma'am. So oftentimes we think, and I think even as adults that don't have children, we think that the goal is to fix or to solve. And there's a time where solutions are necessary and important, but there's so much power in just being with someone, being present and listening and not trying to change it or trying to fix it, but just hearing someone and giving them permission to have those worries, giving them permission to have fear and frustration, and just to be like, hey, it's okay for you to feel this way, but we're going to work together on this and you're not alone. And that is so powerful for parents, for individuals, even with family members, just to completely say it's okay to feel what you need to, and you're not going to be alone in that.
And what I hear Dr. Cooper saying in that is for the parents to learn how to listen to their children, to listen so that they can understand their child's understanding of things, their child's experience of the past several months, and their child's perhaps perceptions and expectations of the time to come, the upcoming school year. And so parents really just stopping and listening and asking the right questions of their children so that the parent can be more informed as to how to proceed in responding to their children.
So really you've got a two-level thing here happening. You've got to manage your own words as you speak to your child and listen to them and to understand what they might face.
Right.
So you really have to be ultra aware as a parent.
Right.
And what do we think kids are going to be facing? What are some of the issues that might come up that parents need to be aware of?
Sure, that's a great question. One of the issues that I've seen a lot lately with my clients that I've worked with is just anxiety. Anxiety is so prevalent even before the pandemic, but also since then. There's a lack of, security, which then creates anxiety responses. So parents should be aware that children may have some behavioral concerns, and it's not because they're trying to act out or they're trying to be disobedient. It's because they face a major life and economic crisis. So there's going to be some times or a season where they're trying to come down from that and navigate and learn how to regulate their emotions. So parents may see anxiety, or in teens, they may see a little bit more depression or concern. So there's going to be some struggles with just navigating how do we support them and how do we to listen to them to see what they're facing. And part of that comes with checking in and being aware and being mindful. We don't know until we ask. And one of the most powerful things is being able to say, hey, help me understand what you're experiencing so that then we can work together to find a solution eventually.
And parents might be overwhelmed in all the things that they're having to contend with.
Sure, everybody's going back. Yeah.
Everybody's going back. And so, when you're overwhelmed and you have things that you need to get done and you're trying to transmit that to your kids, to kind of slow down and see what are they also going through too. I'm trying to impose what needs to happen onto them, needs into quotation marks, without necessarily taking into consideration what it is that they might be experiencing and their ideas about things. That's important too. Parents ought to be mindful of that so as to make a more comprehensive decision, because it's not just about what needs to be done on these higher levels here or with what the parents need done, but the kids need certain things too, and listening to them to have those needs met, and then comprehensively making a decision.
Mm-hmm. And I guess when, this year probably, everything's hyped for everything, but, as these kids go back, that parent-teacher meeting before school, or how they have like an orientation for parents, if they have those things, you probably should think about kind of understanding what their day is going to be like, right?
Mm-hmm, definitely. And it's so helpful, especially from the standpoint of counselors. Counselors can advocate for their clients on a school front as well. And being able to say, hey, this is how we can support the kids at home, at school, in counseling. So as counselors, we've been a helpful resource so that we can get all parties involved and all parties supporting children, and in turn supporting parents, because they have faced the pandemic as well. And they may need a season where they are able to heal and to be able to be listened to and validated. And that may come through counseling as well for parents.
And so the service offered by the University of Holy Cross is really valuable for some of the people who need somebody to talk to even before the school year starts or beyond, right?
Yes, it can be for a whole family system, the parents, the children, and that way everybody's healing together versus disconnecting because of the crisis.
Because listening to one another, listening sounds easier than what it is, but we are getting master's and doctoral degrees with a specific skill set of learning how to listen. To listen is one thing. To truly listen actively in a clinical way is a different thing. And what we're asking parents to do is to acquire a skill similar to that when interacting with a child, but it doesn't come naturally.
No.
That's not something that people just automatically do. People want to be heard more than they are naturally inclined to want to listen. And so sometimes the help of a mental health professional, a counselor, might be needed to help navigate that and mediate conversations within family systems.
And speaking of conversations within family systems, the kids come home from school. And Dr. Cooper, I'm sure that you've had people talk to you about this as well. How was your day? Fine. That's it.
Right.
So then what? Because you really do, as a parent, want, without, prying or being, aggressive about it, how do you get that out of kids?
That's an awesome question, because sometimes, especially with teens, you may see a little bit more resistance, and I'll call it, sometimes families get in a dance and they almost expect the other person to make a certain move, so then it elicits the same reaction and response even before a question is given or stated. So if we can rewire the dance, and what I mean by that is parents could find creative ways to check in with their children. One activity I do in counseling is a worry box. And teens as well as small children can put their worries in like a little box. And at the end of the week, the family can come together and say, hey, what were our worries? How can we support each other? How can we make sure that everybody's being heard? So parents can get creative with that, writing little notes of encouragement. And when we build connection with our children and our families, then they're going to be more likely to want to connect back to us. But sometimes that takes doing something surprising to be able to break the dance, as I would call it.
Well, I guess you could be creative in a lot of ways, the worry box, or maybe, okay, ice cream time is a time where we talk about, whatever, or, something. I'm just... Yeah,
and parents can come up with all sorts of ideas as to how to elicit that type of response from a child. And if they can't, going to a counselor, a professional that can help them, give them the skills,
right,
the techniques, the know-how to be able to do that and elicit that type of response, to communicate with their children, to be able to offer them what they want to be able to offer them as parents.
Dr. Cooper, thank you so much for joining us. I love the way you positioned it as a dance. That's a really good analogy. So thank you, and congratulations. I know the doctor part is very recent, and we congratulate you for that.
Thank you so much. Blessings to all of you.
And thank you for joining us. We're going to be right back after this, so stay with us.
Louisiana needs a hero.
Someone to look after it, preserve it.
We have to do something now.
If everybody took care of their spot, we wouldn't have this conversation.
We all have to do our part.
The power is yours. All you have to do is pick it up. Care about it. Protect it. Save it.
Be an everyday hero.
Keep Louisiana beautiful.
Parents want the best for their children always, in school, in society, in future opportunities, all those things. And this past year has thrown a wrench into the works of some of that anticipation. But it also offered possibilities and, amazing new ways of doing things. We may have more choices now, and we may have that continuing as we go on.
Right.
Morphing in some ways.
We've had a new way of doing things that in many respects has worked, and we've had a very challenging year, and we're seeing that there's some things that have been of benefit, and technology has been crucial and essential in that. And so people are consumers of goods and services, and so parenting and educating one's child and interacting with schools and teachers, a big part of that has been through technology. Zoom meetings and things of that nature. And so I think that many parents perhaps have an expectation. People are busy. People are running to and fro, all sorts of different activities, and to have another thing to have to contend with, which we always do.
Right.
But when you see that it can work remotely as well, parents are going to have some expectations in terms of having this continue beyond the pandemic. I know of many parents in many school systems that have operated quite well with parent-teacher conferences and a number of different functions. And so these are some of the things that might continue, as well as what we had discussed earlier in terms of students, parents and their students perhaps not wanting to infect other students with whatever, but still don't want them to miss seat time. And seat time doesn't necessarily have to be in a face-to-face situation, perhaps.
Right,
at times,
school desk. Yeah.
In the school desk, at times it might be of benefit to have it be synchronously from home. And so parents wanting those options and advocating for their students to have those options so that everyone wins. People are staying healthy, and students are getting the information, the instructional time necessary to be successful.
Yeah, a lot of this has really pushed us forward thinking even about what we have and how we can make it work. I
know for myself, as a university professor, I've already made a decision for myself, and I think a number of my colleagues have as well, is that, now granted this is for adults, that I'm going to have my face-to-face class. We're going to meet on campus and have our classes we traditionally do, but I know that people are going to not be able to make it or attend for one reason or another. They're not feeling well, or they have something else that doesn't permit them to get there in the way that we would expect. I'm going to offer a link. I'm going to offer a link so that they can go ahead and synchronously join the class. Now, granted, it's a very different situation with adult learners.
Right, because they have different, their goals are now vested in that.
But to offer options to the student, to offer options to the parent, because it is a service. And, those of us who are recipients of goods and services, we're consumers. And so much of how we operate in today's society, good or bad, we are consumers. And so we're looking at this in ways to come up with solutions, to come up with ideas, to really meet everyone's needs so that everyone can receive their optimal outcomes with regard to students and academic success, parents and having their children's well-being met, and all of the above.
And certainly, as this all does kind of change as we go along, school is always going to be a place where kids learn relationships, where kids learn responsibilities and how to behave and, how to react and all those things. And so that's important, too, that we can't go, we don't necessarily want to go where we don't ever see each other.
We don't want to also create conditions where a situation can be manipulated and people start to take advantage of things, because that's not good for anyone either. And for parents to be able to use discernment and say, you know what, no, you're going to school. You're physically going to go for face-to-face, because it's not just about the instructional and content time, but the socialization, interacting with other people, learning how to negotiate conflict and resolve situations and come up with resolutions and just learning to be kind with one another and being prudent in social situations with others. All that's important, and that needs to be learned. That needs to be learned as a preschool age child, as a school age child, as an adolescent. And so for parents to use discernment and know under what circumstances we're going to use these things that are available to us now, and under what circumstances we're going to insist upon other ways of doing things, of actually physically going to a campus.
Because, you know, as we were talking earlier with Dr. Cooper, it is important that we learn how to listen, not just to talk.
Yes.
And how to listen. And sometimes the way you talk and listen at home is not the way you're going to talk and listen with not strangers, but friends or acquaintances or, you know, teachers.
I have to be in tune to my child. I have to know my child, and I have to listen to my child. So I have to know this is manipulation as opposed to this is something legitimate. And so when you truly know your child, when you truly take the time to listen to your child, you come to learn when it's a legitimate thing that needs to be listened to as opposed to a manipulative tactic used by a child. And so parents spend enough time with their children to learn that about them.
Right, and we only have a couple seconds of it. I did want to bring this up. And for kids, what a sad thing. No more Google spell check your brain and your phone kind of thing.
It's been a time for students to be creative in how they're able to provide what they have learned to their instructors.
Look at what this has brought. Right? Okay, well, before we go, I did want to talk to you about school at the University of Holy Cross and what's happening in the fall.
Yeah, and speaking of students and parents advocating for the students and giving them what's possible, dual enrollment. The University of Holy Cross offers dual enrollment to high school juniors and seniors. And so if you have a high school student in your household and they're juniors and seniors and they're interested in acquiring college credits, look us up on our website and look at the different courses that are available to these students so that they can be duly enrolled and earn credit for a high school degree as well as the first few courses of a university degree.
That is so valuable.
Yes.
Not only monetarily, but just to get in, and some things you can do ahead of time so you're not.
And this is another way of parents and educators at the high school and university level redefining things and reimagining how things can be done in a pragmatic way that benefits all.
Right, and you can take advantage of it with little effort. You know, you can just look it up and see.
Let me tell you, it is a bargain. It is a bargain. You really need to look this up. It's a wonderful thing for your high schoolers.
Okay. All right, tips before we go.
You know, and we need to continue to follow the CDC guidelines, even though we are in a new phase of restrictions being eased, but we need to continue to follow those guidelines, and that we need to collaborate with one another, parents and teachers working together to do what's in the best interest of our children.
Okay, and always keep listening.
Always listen.
I love that tip, and I think I'm going to say that to myself every day, you know, because really it's with the narration going on in your own head, you know, you really got to calm that down and listen to the other person.
It's an important thing.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, Dr. Royce Salgado, and your colleagues and all your colleagues at the University of Holy Cross for joining us. And thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. We want to help as we are all coping during the COVID crisis.